US President Donald Trump has, for the first time, ruled out using military force to take Greenland during an eagerly awaited address to world leaders in Davos. However, he demanded immediate negotiations to acquire the island from Denmark. Mr. Trump accused Denmark of being ungrateful in refusing to give up Greenland, repeating the claim that only the United States could defend the island.
Donald Trump arrived by helicopter in the Swiss Alps and straight into the maelstrom over Greenland. He'd not let up on his demand to own the island, countering European anger with a volley of mockery and insults. In a long and rampantly self-congratulatory address to delegates, the insults continued.
Certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it.
Then Greenland, which he frequently referred to as Iceland. The US had taken the island in World War II just for Denmark. Now he was only asking for it back.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. People thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II.
Then the hint of a threat.
So we want a piece of ice for world protection, and they won't give it. We've never asked for anything else, and we could have kept that piece of land, and we didn't. So they have a choice. You can say yes, and we will be very appreciative, or you can say no, and we will remember.
So it boiled down to President Trump's simple formulation. NATO would be nothing without the United States. All he was asking for in return was a large piece of ice that was essential for world peace. The US had done it before, European countries had done it before. There would be no force, but a negotiation had to start immediately.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by our Europe editor, Tony Connolly, who was in Davos, and our Washington correspondent, Sean Whelan. And Tony, to you first. Donald Trump has ruled out using military force. He is still insistent, however, that he wants Greenland. What has the reaction been like in Davos?
I think the reaction really immediately was one of relief that he had taken the threat of military force off the table, and that certainly seemed to be reflected in a rebound in US stocks this afternoon. The very swift reaction from Denmark, the Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen saying in Copenhagen that the intention was still intact for the Trump administration, even though it was positive that military force had been taken off the table. He said the problem hadn't really gone away. He preferred to continue with this track of diplomacy, this working group that was set up last week involving himself and the Greenlandic Foreign Minister, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. The problem there is that the White House still depicts that diplomatic track as being all about the United States' acquisition of Denmark, not about acquisition of Greenland, not about what to do about Greenland. I think the European side now are going to really reinforce this idea that NATO will and should play a greater role in the defence of Greenland. President Stubb, Alexander Stubb, the president of Finland, this morning making the point that his country's contribution to NATO was really the largest contribution in terms of Arctic capabilities. 1 million men and women trained in Finland on Arctic capabilities, and that's really, according to the Finnish president, where this should now go in terms of the debate.
And Sean Whelan, to you in Washington, this is the first time that we've heard Donald Trump rule out the use of military force. However, he wants those immediate negotiations. How do you think he's likely to approach those talks?
Well, what talks? We have to see if the Danes are willing sellers on this one. But you're right. I mean, Tony was right there. Caroline Levitt, the White House spokesman, said last week, immediately after Løkke Rasmussen was here in meetings with the Vice President and Marco Rubio, that these talks are not about what to do about Greenland. It's how are you going to sell it to us and what's the price. The money that's been talked of openly around here is $700 billion, slightly less than the amount that was knocked off the value of the US stock markets yesterday once they reopened to react to this news of a bid for Greenland. But it's become an issue of quiet horror around the place. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who's in Davos now, was saying, why don't people in Washington come out and say what they say in private about this idea in particular and about Donald Trump in general. He, of course, has done nothing but troll the president since he got back into office on social media. Some people think that's his way into campaigning for the next presidential election, be that as it may. He made some pretty critical comments about Europeans, urging them to stand up and be more forthright in their dealings with Donald Trump. As a result, perhaps, he's been cancelled from a US House event that was supposed to be taking place in Davos today. He's been stood down officially because they don't want any politicians on the panel, but he had been formally invited previously.
Sean Whelan in Washington and Tony Connolly in Davos. Thank you.